What I believe is common sense, I'm learning it's not that common. From immigrant to journalist and now mayor, Lily Wu's story is nothing short of remarkable. And in November of 2023, the people of Wichita voted her into office to help shape the future of their city. From my seat on the Sedgwick County Commission, I've worked closely with Lily in trying to better align the interests of Wichita and Sedgwick County, while also trying to bring solutions to some of our most significant community challenges. Over the last year, I've come to better understand what makes the mayor tick and what she hopes to accomplish with her time in public office. We talk about these things and more, including the topics of reform and what that could potentially look like, and how we both deal with the highs and lows of local politics. I hope you enjoy my conversation with City of Wichita Mayor Lily Wu. Lily Wu, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thinking about some of the things that I wanted to talk about. You and I talk frequently. I mean, we talk multiple times a week. We typically talk every day, at least via text message. There's just so much that I want to cover and talk to you about, but I want to share something with you, a moment of insecurity that took place for me. The first time we spoke at an event together, and we speak at events a lot together, they read your bio before I spoke. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like here she is. She speaks like multiple languages. She's got this incredible immigrant story, the American dream story. And here I am. I used to hit baseballs and I sell mattresses. But your story is compelling. Your story is remarkable. I don't know if everybody knows your story. Like, how did you become an American? And please share that, because I think it's an inspiration to people to understand where you've come from and how that's shaped your experiences and shaped your life.
You know, first and foremost, you have an awesome bio yourself. So you should never dwindle what your experiences have been. And I'm very appreciative that you are a public servant in our community.
I appreciate
because
that.
I know it's really difficult on either side, of the city side or the county side or USD 259 or a state legislator or a federal government official.
It's a lot.
And I think a lot of folks just don't understand all the different layers of government. And so I'm very appreciative of you because you're trying to help people understand. And for me, it's not just understand, but empower people. And I think that's what this country is all about, is about empowering individuals. So my life story really boils down to a few things about who I am. It's about leadership. It's about being a lifelong learner. It's about being a listener and someone who loves. And so my family, originally from China, so my parents were born and raised there. I was not born there, though. That's a common misconception I get from people. I was actually born in Guatemala. I was born and raised in Guatemala, and my parents had this dream of one day coming to America, but they knew that they couldn't just walk into this country. So they tried to come here by applying through my grandpa who lived in Wichita, but it took nearly 10 years. So instead of going from China to the United States, they went from China to Guatemala, and that's where Carlos and I were born. I was born and raised there until I was 8 years old. And then in 1993, April 2nd of 1993, my family had the opportunity to finally immigrate to America.
Wow.
And so Grandpa lived here in Wichita, and I went through Wichita Public Schools. I always say this part of my story because I think it's so important to realize what the experience of an immigrant is. When you come to a country that you don't know the language, you don't know the culture, you really want to go back to your home. And so I remember my very first day of school, I went home crying to my mom, and I begged her to take me back home.
Oh, wow.
But she reminded me, this is our new home. And from that moment on, I had to grow up. And I had to grow up fast because I knew that I would have to take a leadership role within my own family. As an 8-year-old, I understood that amongst our family members, someone would have to learn the language well enough to help the entire family.
Wow. So did you speak English at all?
No, I did not.
And you were 8 years old?
I was 8 years old. Wow. And so I knew that that was part of who I was supposed to become. And to this very day, I still play that role. I'm still the translator for my mom and my dad. My mom's a hairstylist here in Wichita, and my dad works for the Dillons in South Wichita, where we grew up, in the Chinese kitchen. Those are the hardworking middle-class family members that are in our community. They're my parents, and to this day, I still help them with their health documents, their health choices, and it really reminds me that we need to remind ourselves that we're part of a family. You can be part of a chosen family or blood family. And for me, I've gotten to have a lot of non-blood related family because people helped me realize my full potential. So when I was little, when I was 8, Grandpa loved watching Channel 3. He loved watching the local news at 6 o'clock, followed by Wheel of Fortune. And so that's how I learned English. I learned English formally in the public school system, but I also learned it informally by watching television.
So, time out. So, Wheel of Fortune, is that what, Pat Sajak?
Yes, and Vanna White.
That's it. You learned English through Pat Sajak. I love that. What a story. That's incredible.
So, I've always appreciated the power of television.
Yes.
It taught me, the local journalists taught me about the issues in our community. And back then in the 90s, you talked a lot about like the positive things that were going on in community. And yes, there were some issues in the early 90s. But as a little kid, I remember the good things. And I remember Riverfest would be on TV. Miss USA was hosted right here in Wichita.
That's right.
And then I also remember watching Wheel of Fortune and just understanding that there's power in television and learning. And so I wanted to become a journalist from that very young age. And from that moment on, it was a dream. But a dream can only become reality if you make it a goal.
Yeah.
And part of that is you have to share it with others. You have to share what your aspiration is. And in Wichita Public Schools especially, I shared my dream and my goal. And there were teachers and there were mentors that tried to help me.
Built you up, lifted you up.
Yes. So I went to Truesdale Middle School, and that's where I met my very first mentor. And she was a school psychologist there. She tested me for the gifted program. So one of the things that probably a lot of people don't know about me is I'm 100% a nerd. I love libraries.
Yeah.
I love being in a setting of learning.
Yes.
I have a thirst for that. And so for me, getting into the gifted program was the opportunity for me to challenge myself. And because English, again, was not my first language, I was told that I would struggle in English, which gave me even more passion to excel in it. Because when someone tells me no, that's their idea of what my capabilities are.
Sure.
Well, I have, I believe, the capability to push myself to greater lengths. And I always encourage people that they have the opportunity to have two choices every day. The choice of your attitude and your effort, and then the choice of being a victim or a victor. And I say you're either a victim of your circumstances or a victor in your own story. And every day you get to write a page in your story and you get to say, today I'm the victor of my story. And I think the more times that you say that you're the victor of your own story, you will excel. And people want to surround you with that support.
I think that's incredibly powerful. And it's interesting because I've noticed some things. I told someone the other day that spending so much time with you over the last year and a half that I kind of figured out some things that make you tick. And I've noticed things about you. You talk about being a lifelong learner and you thirst for learning. One of the things I've noticed about you is when I sat next to you in meetings, you're an avid note taker. I mean, pages and pages of notes. And then I watch you do this and it makes sense now. You telling me you're a learner, you're a listener, you're a learner. The other thing is I just watched you light up to tell your story. And I've seen you light up when you speak at certain events, and there's certain issues and topics I think that really move your soul. But this immigrant story, this coming to America story, this ingratiating yourself into a community and for your family, but becoming an American and becoming a Wichitan, that seems to light you up a different way. Am I misreading that? Or, I mean, there's something in you.
100%.
Yeah, what is that? I mean, we're all shaped by our experiences. My experiences were different. I grew up in the north end of Wichita. I played baseball. It very much formed me and my capacity to understand discipline and teamwork and winning and losing and how to receive correction and coaching. And then going on into doing other things in business. Those things shaped me. But what I watched you just describe shaped you in a pretty profound way that I can't relate to. Like, you understand the immigrant story. You understand what it means to be American, maybe on a different level than a native-born citizen does. Am I wrong in interpreting that?
You're not wrong. So, coming to this country, every morning I wake up just grateful that I get to live in the United States of America. I know that there are people around the world that still see the United States as the beacon of democracy and of hope. And I live here. You live here.
Yeah.
And we need to find gratitude in living in this country. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. It is still a young democracy that has room for improvement. And that is the beautiful thing about being an American. You can constantly have that attitude of improvement and of betterment, not just for yourself, but for society.
To form a more perfect union.
Yes, exactly. And for me, I think my passion comes from understanding that I received a free public school education. I'm a proud product of the public school system.
Me too.
I went to Truesdale, graduated from Wichita East High. I was part of the International Baccalaureate program. And I always, whenever I'm in a group, I always want to say thank you, especially to the folks who've been a Wichitan for more than 30 years, because they paid for my education. I know there's no such thing as free.
Yeah.
Someone invested in me. And for my education, it was the taxpayers of Wichita back in the 90s and early 2000s that invested in me. And so I'm grateful because now I want to give back. And so my attitude for giving back to community really is because I love the city.
Yeah.
I love the people here. I've made so many connections growing up here, but it's not just because I grew up here. I became really involved here. And I think that that's where I'm trying to encourage more young people to not just do the motions, but rather become more, have more depth in your involvement, whether it's community service or understanding an organization. I've been part of an organization called the Wichita Asian Association since I was 18 years old.
Wow.
From being a performer to a volunteer to being the pageant director, then becoming the president of the nonprofit, and now just a past president that advises. I think that reminds me that every one of us can plug in and help community. And when you are in an organization like Wichita Asian Association, it's 100% run by volunteers. There's no staff member.
Really?
And we put on the largest Asian American festival in the whole region. And it's all put on by volunteers.
Yeah.
And so it reminds me that all of us can do our part. And if that's something that you care a lot about, then get plugged in. And I want more people to get plugged in.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to do here. And one of the things that I noticed when I first got professionally involved after athletics, after sports, and really ingratiated myself into the economy of Wichita and the business organizations and the nonprofit organizations. There's really a lot going on here in regards to services, a lot of organizations and nonprofits. What I remember noticing out of the gate was that there seemed to be a lot of siloing, as there was a lot of people in their corners and there wasn't a whole lot of collaboration or working together. I honestly think that's changing, as I really do feel, particularly in some of the social services, homelessness, foster care, mental health, substance use, is I'm sensing more collaboration today than what I've noticed in the last 15, 20 years that I've been here in Wichita doing professional work. And I think that's because people see a need in this community. We are a very generous community, very generous. Very, very philanthropic, very engaged. And it's indicative of what you just described. It's about people caring. I'll never forget when I lived on the East Coast playing baseball. I lived in New York for a period of time, lived in Florida for a period of time, lived in Cape Cod for a period of time. And the reputation of people from Kansas in general, but Wichita particularly, was this Kansas nice, is that people were always friendly. They were always nice. I used to describe it walking down the streets in Boston, that people had a really big front wall. And then when you got past the front wall, the second wall wasn't as big. And I think it was inverted here. I think people have a very small wall. It's easy to say hello. People are friendly. But to get to know someone intimately, the second wall is always a little bit bigger. And I think that is indicative of what we find here is people really do want to engage. They really do care about community. And that's what you're saying, the involvement piece. And I think our generation is taking that to another level when it comes to the involvement. So it's really cool to hear your story in regards to, and I want people to know your story, because I think when people understand your history, they understand what your makeup is. They understand the ferocity in which you talk about this place, the pride in which you talk about this place. And I've noticed it, and it's been encouraging to me.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about becoming mayor.
Sure.
I'll never forget, you interviewed me, you were at Cake, and you interviewed me when I first got on the commission about my family Bible that a woman found in Minnesota. You called over and said, hey, I'd like to do an interview. They found this family heirloom, and she sent it to me. And you did the interview, and it was a great interview, and you always did a good job as a journalist. And then you said, hey, do you got a couple seconds? And we talked afterwards, and you said, hey, I'm actually thinking about running. And I could have swore you told me you were going to run for city council at that point in time. And I said, man, I think you'd be great. You should do it. We need more young, energetic people with a vision in this community. And then mayor. And then you ran for mayor. Everything you've just told me about caring and wanting to be involved and really trying to change momentum in our city and in our community, it all makes sense. But why mayor? Like, sure. You can do this from the nonprofit space. You can do this from the business space. You can do this in a lot of spaces. But you threw your hat into the arena and said, I'm going to run for mayor. Like, talk me through that. I know why I ran for office. Tell me why you ran for office.
Okay, so let's start with picking up from where I left off. I graduated from East. I then went to Wichita State University.
You're a shocker.
I am a shocker, but I'm also a shocker because I got a Gore Scholarship. I got a full ride to attend WSU. And back to people investing in me, I've always been a big believer that when you've been given an opportunity, that you then have to share that opportunity with others.
For much is given, much is required.
Yes, absolutely. So that has always been in the back of my head. After I graduated with 2 degrees in international business and integrated marketing communication from WSU, I then went on to win a Rotary Scholarship. And that scholarship was to pursue my master's degree at the University of Hong Kong. And that scholarship in particular had a word called the Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship. It's an ambassador piece. So since my early 20s, I've been an ambassador for the city of Wichita abroad. And so when I studied in Hong Kong, I not only went and did my studies, but I also gave presentations throughout Asia. I gave more than 50 presentations.
Really?
And I spoke in English and sometimes in Cantonese. And I had the opportunity to talk about Wichita's story. So now, fast forward, after I came back from Hong Kong, I actually had an opportunity, whether to stay in Hong Kong or come back to Wichita. And I was part of a group called Visioneering Wichita back in the early 2000s. And it was to envision what Wichita should be in the next 20 years. Now we're in those 20 years, and we're seeing it. Just this past weekend, NCAA March Madness, Interest Bank Arena activated. That was the vision. The vision was to bring it back to the core where all the infrastructure is already in place. So things at Visioneering that really stuck with me as a young person was there are more people leaving Wichita and Kansas than coming back into Kansas or Wichita.
That when I first got involved in business, this was what we heard. We remember the Chung report and all these things, that we were exporting so much talent and we weren't boomeranging people back or importing any talent. And you saw this.
Absolutely. So that's when I learned the words brain drain. And so since I was in my early 20s, I knew about brain drain. And so when I had the choice of either coming back to Wichita or staying in Hong Kong, I said, you know what? I should come back home. I've been now educated. Now I have an opportunity to give back. And I still have that dream. That 8-year-old girl still wanted to fulfill the dream of becoming a journalist someday. So I came back to Wichita. I was part of a group that had an internship basically at Youth Entrepreneurs. And that was an organization that I was a part of since I was in high school. Then I became a staff member for Youth Entrepreneurs. Then after that, I gave a presentation at a Rotary Club. And Larry Hatteberg happened to be in that room.
How cool.
He heard my story and he said, why don't you come to Cake News and I'll show you the facility. Well, little did I know that it was an informal job interview.
Wow.
After I got done with the tour and, I'm writing down notes, I'm asking questions, they offered me my first break in TV news. So I started at Cake News in September of 2010, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity because Larry Hatteberg opened that door for me. And then had the opportunity to stay there for 9 years. And the role of being a journalist is actually being a listener. You're a storyteller, but you have to listen first in order to help people share their story. And so as a listener for the 9 years, I had the beats of local government. So I went to all the city council meetings, Sedgwick County Commission meetings, and then eventually they moved me to crime. And so then I became the crime beat reporter. And so I went to every single Wichita Police news briefing. And back then it was every morning. And so I got to really understand what local government is working on. And so back in 2019, I had the opportunity to move on from that career at Cake and then start with a promotion at KWCH Channel 12. And at KWCH, that's where I became a multimedia journalist. Basically means I shot my own story, edited my story, presented the story, and then also anchored the 4 to 5 o'clock news. I did this almost every single day for 3 years. And so that allowed me the opportunity to travel all around Wichita, really listening to the issues. One of the issues I started hearing was this really negative perception about Wichita. And I love this community. So I tried to challenge that narrative because I see the good in our community. I see it every day. And so for me, when there was that opportunity of putting my name in the ring, I actually did. And it's because I love this community. And being the mayor of the city of Wichita, because we have what's called a weak mayor system, which is a council manager form of government, I have no executive powers. I have no veto powers. I'm basically a council member that is voted on by the entire city. But my role as mayor is really to be the ambassador and connector for this community. Yeah. So it goes back to being in my 20s, being that ambassador.
Your resume already pointed towards that direction, and all the things that you did previously kind of led you into that moment of continuing your ambassadorship into the mayor's role. I want to talk about, you brought something up. I'm going to talk about it a little later. I want to talk about the form of government for the City of Wichita because it's different than Sedgwick County. Sedgwick County government's what I know. City of Wichita is a little foreign of the type of government system over there. I want to talk about that, but I want to talk about something else you said. I want to talk about the listening piece of it. And what you just illustrated was that your experience has shaped you, and it shaped the way you go about your work and your job. The same is said for me, from an athlete to pastoral ministry to business. All of that shaped me. And the attribute that I think is most needed many times in this role that we're in regards to political office is the capacity to listen. I loved the campaign. I absolutely love the campaign. Now, what's more fun than the campaign is being on the other side of the campaign when you've actually won an election and you're actually moving into office and actually the governing piece. But one of the things I liked about the campaign was the door knocking and talking to people and listening. And when you listen to people, they will tell you what's on their heart. If you approach them in a way that's genuine and authentic, and much like ministry for me, the listening and the trying to serve people, they'll tell you. This is what's going on. This is what we need. These are where our hopes, our aspirations were. I thought I heard very clearly about some of the things on the county side that caused me to want to run and to win an election and to govern. What did you hear when you were campaigning and you were listening to people, not just from the journalist angle, but the campaign, the knocking on doors? What were they telling you that they wanted from this city?
Number one, they wanted to feel safe in this community. Number two, they wanted to make sure that there were jobs in this community. That's how you actually keep people and attract people to come to our community. I also heard a lot of distrust. I heard and I've seen it. And so I knew that as a journalist, one of the things that we do as journalists is hold city officials accountable. And I get to do that in this role if people understand our local government, because I represent the people. I am not the city manager. In our form of government, what I am is really the board chair. I chair this group of 7 of us, and then we try to tell the CEO, this is what you should do. And then the CEO then carries it out. The CEO is the city manager.
Right.
And so what I heard from community was, hey, please work on the things that local government should be good at. Public safety, being a good partner to make sure that we have jobs, and have an honest government that actually is transparent and held accountable.
Right.
But last but not least, I really wanted this last piece, and that is building a united community.
Yes.
Because I had heard about all this division. I am the only candidate that was not backed by a major party. And I want that to sink in for a little bit, because local government at the city council level is supposed to be nonpartisan. When you go out to vote, it's just my name. It doesn't have anything next to my name.
It's just different than the county. We run partisan elections, yeah.
And so because of that, I wanted to keep to the true value of being a nonpartisan. And so I tried knocking on as many doors and asking for that $500 donation. And again, I think people did not give me credit where credit was due. I worked really hard.
I saw it.
And that's why people invested in the vision. The vision was public safety, growing the economy, restoring trust, and building a united community. And people wanted that.
Yeah.
And that's what I've kept trying to do at City Hall.
Yeah.
Now in the governing piece, it actually aligns really well, because the governing piece, you asked the community through a community-wide survey, so it's data-driven. The community says right now the top priorities are crime, streets, economic development, and homelessness.
Yeah.
So they mirror what my campaign
what you were
has
hearing
been.
from people. Yeah. It's interesting because we arrived at similar conclusions, but we took different routes to get there. When I decided to run for office, I made the decision. I'm 1 year ahead of you. So I was a 22 election, you're a 23 election. I began to look at what was going on in the community in regards to county services. Now, what people don't understand, and what I think we're trying to, you and I both are trying to do, is educate people about the difference between city government and county government, where there's redundancies, but where there's differences. The county government is very much a service provider, public works, public health, public safety. And what I began to listen and observe for myself as a user of those services, what county government was very unstable. We had lost a significant amount of workforce. When I looked at EMS, they had lost a third of their paramedics since 2019, and response times, especially to rural parts of our community, were really lagging. The sheriff was down 120 deputies. ComCare was down over 200 full-time employees. 911 was only at 70% staffing. They receive 1,100 calls a day. On and on and on. I kept seeing this instability. So what I wanted to run, the chief element of my platform was I wanted to stabilize county government so we can have efficient and effective services. The second part of it was you and I have also talked about, you talked about the unity piece. I talked a lot about the relational unhealth of our community, that I wanted to contend for the relational health of our community. I wanted to lead in a way with civility, to cut through the partisan framework, to actually talk about what happens on the local level. And what happens on the local level is services, not as much politics. And I felt like we had become to where what was happening on the federal level had bled into the national, onto the local level. And what it had done is it created a lot of strife and a lot of contention. And with that lack of collaboration and that lack of civility, it was impacting our capacity to perform services. Those were the things I talked about, very similar to the things you talked about. But you don't strike me as a very political person. And here we are in a political role now. Now, I know the city is not a partisan election. You don't run as a Republican, a Democrat, or a Libertarian, but you're not really a political person. Am I reading the room correctly?
That is correct. So growing up in a household of immigrants, my family, all they wanted to do was provide us with the best opportunities. And they knew that since they didn't speak a lot of English, the best opportunity they could provide us was an environment where their children would never feel hungry, that they would have a roof over their heads, and that they had loving parents. Yeah. And the basics were taken care of by these immigrant parents that I'm so grateful for. And so they also taught me financial responsibility and financial literacy. So my points of view come from my lived experiences. I talk a lot about my family because they're literally constituents of this community.
Sure.
And so when I make decisions, I am trying to remember that we have a lot of people on fixed incomes. We have a lot of people who want government just to work to solve issues. But if you're looking to government to solve all your issues, you're going to be disappointed.
Absolutely.
Because government doesn't have its role in a lot of social issues. Government has a role to play when it comes to public safety, police and fire. When you call 911, you want to make sure from the city side, they actually respond. From the county side, the EMS will respond. And then from the public works side, we want to make sure that the potholes are filled, that there's roads, especially at the major intersections, that are going to be cleared of the snow. Those are the things that local government works on.
That's right.
Water and sewer, also not political. And so for me, that's where I'm staying in my lane.
Okay, but you have this tag of libertarian, right? And I know your naysayers, a libertarian, she's a libertarian, she doesn't believe in local government, that's not what I get from you. When you and I talk privately, when we talk in formal settings, that's not what I get. So what is the libertarian?
Sure.
And let me just say that I was for many years, particularly in college, a card carrying libertarian. I kind of cut my teeth in the libertarian movement. And I was more of the libertarian wing of the Republican Party for a couple reasons. Number one, I had a significant mistrust of government, particularly federal government. I also didn't like war. And when I was in college is when 9/11 took place. I was very much a supporter of the war in Afghanistan, but I wasn't a supporter of the war in Iraq, particularly what took place after the invasion of Iraq. And that really kind of helped me cut my libertarian angle view of foreign policy and the non-interventionist policy. And then the spending levels and the debt and the acclimation of debt that we were doing as a nation. So I'm not a card-carrying Republican, I'm a conservative Republican, but I still have these libertarian leanings, particularly on the federal government. But you're not really a political, I'm more political than you are. So this libertarian tag that you were given, and that you've worn that tag, like explain to me.
I don't wear that proudly because I'm actually a classical liberal. And if people actually understood what a classical liberal is being a strong defender of the Constitution. As a journalist, strong defender of the First Amendment right to speak, to gather. And so I think a lot of folks just need to understand that I'm trying my very best to keep to the principles of what this role is, which is supposed to be nonpartisan, and stick to the issues that are really local.
Yeah.
Police, fire, streets, the water, sewer system. And then when it comes to economic development, I believe that there is a role to play from the public side, but jobs are created by the private sector.
Yes.
They're not created by government. Government is not supposed to be in that position other than to make sure that they cut red tape so that business can thrive, so that they can provide jobs for the community. And what I love about our community in particular is that we have public, private, and education really collaborating.
Yeah.
That's why you're seeing the success. Just down the street, the biomedical campus.
Beautiful.
That is a perfect example of how collaboration really works.
A generational opportunity for this community.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And so when we talk about politics, I never talk about being a libertarian. Am I a registered libertarian? Yes, but I really am more of an independent. And honestly, I am someone that's just trying to work with both sides to make sure that we come to solutions together, because there's going to be compromise.
That's right.
You're not going to get your way the whole time, the right or the left. And so let's figure out how we can find solutions for our community.
Well, you're a localist. You care deeply about what happens on the local level and pushing government decisions to the local level and to the community. I would agree with that philosophy. I would consider myself a localist too. What's happening at the federal level, the state level, I want to contend and make decisions on the local level where people have the opportunity to come have a coffee with me, to show up into my office. They see me at sporting events. They see me at restaurants. That's where local government happens at its purest form. And that's where the best services are happening in its purest forms, on the local level. So you're a localist. Let's talk politics. You okay with talking politics?
Sure.
You're a year and a half in now, right? About a year?
A year and 2 months.
Okay, so grade it. Give me the experience to this point. What have you enjoyed? What has really been for the birds? And you're like, man, I don't enjoy that as much. I'll tell you the same on my end. But tell me, how's it been the last year?
So let me start with some challenges, because I think it sets the stage of what I actually inherited. I did not inherit a surplus. I would love to have inherited a city where the finances weren't in the deficit side, because then I could talk about, hey, what can we do with development of public property? We're not in that position right now. I inherited a budget deficit. I inherited really a lot of relationships that needed to be rebuilt. And over the last year, we've had the challenges of whether it's a cyber attack to, the drought, things that the drought actually happened even before I came into office, but it was not being used as a clear focus. But then it became a focus when we became stage 2 of the drought. Yeah. And then challenges even in the last year from something I would never have imagined having to live through, and that is the tragedy of American Airlines Flight 5342. And so I've had a very challenging year, and I see that our community is still trying to rebuild post-COVID. And so those have been part of my 1 year. But then
pause. Because before we get to opportunities and things that are good, I want to stay there in the challenges piece. How are you holding up personally? You and I had a conversation about 6 months ago because you were working 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. It was pretty wild. And you and I had a conversation. I said, hey, Mayor, I think that you need to find a day that you take off. You and I talked it was under the umbrella of Sabbath and Sabbath rest and trying to find time to really shut down and recalibrate. And I said, Mayor, I think that in order to be a great leader, you're going to have to be healthy personally. And I told you I was worried that you were working at a level and a pace that I didn't think you could maintain and sustain. I think you have taken some time and tried to take off Sundays at least, but I follow you on social media and I see that you work 7 days a week. Like, how are you holding up personally?
Thank you for asking that. I don't often get that question because I'm trying my very best, knowing that I'm a public servant, so it's a 24/7 job. Yeah. Whether I'm at the grocery store, someone sees the mayor, they want to share their concern or share their idea, I'm there. While at the same time, 6 months into the job itself, I was really doing a lot of things by myself, and I almost got burnt out because it really was a lot. And it was a lot because this community had never seen a mayor that, number one, was so visible and present, but also, number two, that wasn't political. And so they were confused about why is this person really just focused on the job? She should speak up about social issues or these other things that they might care about. I'm trying to stay focused on the priorities, sure. And I'm sticking to that exact method because it's community driven, it's data driven, and community says, you're not doing a good job with crime, you're not doing a good job with streets, you're not doing a great job with jobs, and you're not doing a great job with homelessness. So even if I just focus my effort on just those 4 things, that already takes up a lot of my week.
That's a busy schedule.
But there's a lot going on in our community, and I want to make sure that people understand whom to connect with, what they can do, and I want them to feel empowered. Yeah. So thank you for asking about me, because after having that conversation with you, you reminded me that I do deserve also a day where I can recharge. Yeah. And being with my faith family, being at my church, being with my friends, my neighbors, has really helped a lot. Yeah. And I'm so grateful for Sunday. I love my church and
where do you go
family.
To church?
I go to New Spring, so Pastor Mark is awesome. And I'm so grateful that I have that family that helps re-energize me and refills my cup every single week. We have an amazing praise and worship team. So they remind me just who I belong to. Amen. And why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's good, Lily. And I think I didn't even answer earlier, being in this position, yes, my life experiences have also led me here, but I really believe it's a calling. I've prayed a lot about this, and I'm just trying to be an obedient daughter of Christ. And I really believe that he's asking me to bring people together, and not just bring people together, but understand that there's a lot more good that we should focus on. Yes. And when you focus on the good, we can actually have dialogue. Because that's what I love about One Small Step. We have so much more in common. And it's the little differences that make us unique. And we should talk about those differences. Be able to defend your idea, but be able to defend it respectfully and be able to listen to the other side as well. Wow. And so
I've seen you try that, Lily. I've seen you try to do that. And I know politics sometimes gets in the way of that. And I think that the community tries to drag what we know and relate to as politics. When we look at local government, state government, federal government, we interpret that through the lens of politics and political structures. So they try to drag people into the political framework, the political discussion. And I've watched you try to reject that and say, no, I want to stay focused on services and the job and the correct job and the core functions of local government. And I've seen you kind of wade through that, and it's been interesting to watch, frankly. I mean, you and I have different conversations about that. And it's interesting because sometimes we ask government to be something and do something that government probably shouldn't be. What are your thoughts?
Sure. So from the challenges, I always look at things with the positive angle.
You're an optimist.
It's been a great year. Overall, I had the opportunity to represent this community at the International Air Show. One business already started a new office and their other USA headquarters here. Another business is trying to find a USA headquarters in Wichita. So there are businesses that are looking at Wichita and saying, wow, this is a great value, this is a great community, they're moving here, which then means jobs, back to the economic development. So I see a lot of things moving in the right direction when it comes to economic development. I'm hopeful that the buy from Boeing of Spirit will be positive for our community. I see the success with Textron and Bell, and so I'm hopeful in that arena. What I love most, though, from this last year is going to schools where these kids cannot vote for me. And they're feeling this excitement about being a Wichitan. And they understand that this community is investing in them and in their future. And it's been really wonderful to see the attitude of young people being so encouraged about being a Wichitan. And that is not part of really my role in terms of the mayor, but it's really being about the ambassador of this community. And it helps young people understand that maybe someday you'll choose to leave Wichita because of an educational opportunity. I hope you will return because there will be a job for you.
That's it.
And so those have been good successes, and I can see it already. It's working.
I do.
People are feeling it.
Well, you know what I sense is that part of leadership is about casting a vision. It's casting hope. I talk about it frequently as one of the things that I wanted to be responsible for was bringing an energy to our community and planting a vision of hope. That despite the political differences, despite the animosities, despite all these things, is that we can reach into community and reach into people's lives and plant a vision of hope of where we're going. And people need a vision. They need hope. That's one of the things that I think when we talk about poverty, when we talk about homelessness, when we talk about the foster care system, we talk about all these things that are challenges. What's needed is a vision of hope. And a vision of hope a community can rally around and rally behind. When I talk to people, and I begin to say things like, hey, listen, I actually think we do a pretty decent job in certain areas or certain services, but consider this. What if we could do this? What if we can take it to this direction? How would it impact your life here? How could it impact your life here? How could we become more efficient, more effective? I reject the idea that local government is operating at optimal levels right now. I reject that wholly. And I would just say, and I can speak for the county, I can't speak for the city, that I think we do a pretty good job at the county. But I think that the model of local government right now, I think we've maximized that model. I don't know if there's a whole lot of more gain deficiencies or more effectiveness that we could really find in the current model. And in business, when you max out a model, you have to pivot the model and go in a different direction. You and I have talked frequently. We've spoken at events together on this. We get asked questions about this, that we talk a lot about reform. And local government reform and where this can go. More shared services, more functional consolidations. I think actually that what's coming from the state in property tax caps and things of this sort that's likely coming, I think it's going to force our hand. But I don't want it to force our hand because we have to pivot. I want to paint a vision of what could be in local government services when we have more collaboration between city and county. You agree? Where am I going wrong?
Absolutely. So I'm going to tie it all together to some successes. What I've seen over the last year is the city has come together saying homelessness is an issue that we can help solve.
Absolutely.
We can be part of it. Yeah. And that took a lot. That took a lot because that was not part of the community-wide survey. It didn't get on the survey until this year. So it was the will of the 7 individuals that said, okay, we can focus our energy on that.
It was powerful.
$13.5 million has been invested in a multi-agency center. And the whole idea is to be collaborative, to provide the shared services in one location so people can have the temporary shelter and then connect to services. And you guys have been at the table. County has been at the table, and I appreciate that, which then led to this conversation between us about shared services. I really believe that the ball is actually really moving in the right direction. This is not a ball that wasn't already discussed, though.
Sure.
Even my predecessor was talking about this in a way, but nothing really happened. So now we're moving it. And on my very first State of the City address, which was on 3/16 Day, Wichita's Day, I held it at the former Central Library. And I visioned for this community my vision. So again, this is something that I am putting out to community, and it still needs more feedback.
Sure.
So I'm not stopping that engagement. Instead, I'm getting the conversation started.
Yeah.
Someone needed to start the conversation.
Hey man, listen, I was in Scottsdale. I couldn't be at your State of the City address. And I knew something was said because my phone started blowing up with text messages about county's moving into City Hall and you guys are consolidating government and all of these different things. And so I knew you said some things that had ruffled the feathers in a good way. Listen, at the very least, this community deserves the conversation. Are there ways that we can improve local government? Are there efficiencies? Are there more effective ways to do this? If I had a whiteboard, if sitting back here was a whiteboard and not a bobblehead of Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and Churchill, if this was a whiteboard and I put a list of all the things that Sedgwick County government does, public safety, public health, public works, all of it. And then in all 20 cities in Sedgwick County, not just Wichita, I had the same list of all the things they do. Any rational person would look at that list and they would see overlap, they'd see redundancies, and they'd say, wow, why are we not sharing more services? Why are we not consolidating some of these departments and finding efficiencies and finding cost savings? And I'm not to say that that's an easy task, but the community deserves the conversation, and that's the role of leadership. Leadership has to press that conversation because organically, nothing changes, no reform happens if organically We just allow the dice to roll out and see what comes of it. We've got to force this conversation. What I hear mostly are things about property taxes and the rising cost of government. Well, we can cut here and cut there, but what I've continued to say is it's not about taking a scalpel and cutting from here. And that doesn't move the needle the way people are wanting the needle to be moved. What moves the needle is reform. It's pivots. It's modernizing local government, sharing more services, consolidating redundant departments. You and I have been lockstep in this. We've received a lot of praise for these conversations. We've also received some heat. But I hope you're in line with me that we're going to keep talking about this. I'm going to keep talking about this.
I'm fired up about that too, because what I'm hearing from community is they want an efficient and effective government. They don't care exactly who gives the service. They want it to be solved, so provide the actual service, and then make sure that, again, you're being efficient and effective in giving those services. So that's why there's an opportunity with shared services between the city and the county. So my idea back to this old central library was, why don't we move the Wichita Police Department? They currently have 3 floors of City Hall into the old central library, and that allows you guys, the county, to move to City Hall. One of the things that people don't often know is that our city council meetings are held on Tuesday mornings. And so we have this huge chamber that is only utilized 1 day out of the week. So for 6 days out of the week, prime real estate is not being utilized. What do you guys need? Well, you need Wednesdays for your county commission meetings. You need a space to hold those meetings. You can have that space. We can change logos so that you can have that space that represents
not complicated at all. You know who I first heard this idea from about moving into city? It was actually Councilmember Brian Fry. Before he was the first one that said, hey, you guys should really look at doing this. Let's be very clear to the public. We're not talking about merging and consolidating city and county government. I know that is a conversation some people have had. That's not where my head is at. Correct. You and I have not talked on that level. This is about consolidating space. It's saying, what if we created a government center where people could access their city government and their county government in the same building? It's about efficiencies. Is this going, I don't know if we're going to get to that point, but what I appreciate is the idea. And I think the community deserves the conversation, whether we end up doing it or not doing it, whether it makes sense or not makes sense, whether the public library works for police or not. None of my business necessarily. That's a city government conversation. The bottom line is, they deserve the conversation, is that the people deserve creative ideas. Let's roll it out and see what people think about it. There's other opportunities. We talk about parks. We've talked about rec and cultural arts, conversations of what that looks like to consolidate departments. I talk a lot about public health. And right now, the environmental health is at the City of Wichita. Should it be back over at the county? Should the county have a parks department? Should we give that to the City of Wichita? We talked about fire. I talk about fire. Every time I talk about fire, my phone will blow up. But we co-respond on 7,000 calls a year. Sedgwick County Fire and Wichita Fire. We hear that Wichita Fire needs 6 new stations, 100 new firefighters. Well, I know where there's 9 stations and 150 firefighters that I think we can provide better coverage and better service and do it at a better, efficient price. All I'm saying is, there's a lot of work to get these things across the finish line. At the very least, the community deserves the conversation. They deserve leadership that has the courage to have difficult conversations. And I'm going to keep talking about this. I have a hunch you're going to keep talking about this. We talk about this a lot. And I think the community they want this conversation.
We go inside City Hall often when people are looking for you guys. And we have to tell them, you actually have to drive across the way to get to Sedgwick County. And same thing with even the court system. People might have a Sedgwick County
versus district court,
a municipal court
all the time.
And they don't understand the difference. So I would like to reduce that frustration for people, make it so that it makes sense for people.
So that the end user has a more efficient and effective conversation. I'm a retailer by trade. That was my private vocation. I think a lot about customer service and what the end user and how they're experiencing my organization and my company. The same should be true for local government. How is the end user experiencing the services that we provide? And I'm not drawing the conclusion that business and government are the same thing. No, they have different aims. But the aim that should be similar is we should all seek efficiencies. We should all seek proper stewardship of resources, but we should all have the end user and the way they experience your services in mind. So we're going to keep talking about this. I'm willing to stake literally my political livelihood as a local elected politician on these types of discussions because I think they're necessary. And I think we have to pivot. We have to make local government more efficient and more effective. And again, I think we could cut here and there, but I think the wholesale changes people want and that people deserve come in a different model. I wholly reject the idea that what we're doing now is optimized. I think we do a pretty good job with what we have. I think the model needs to change. As our community continues to change, we're going to keep talking about it. All right, let's wind this thing down.
You know, I really appreciate this opportunity because I think oftentimes people don't know us as individuals.
Yeah.
And that's something I pride myself. I come from my lived experiences and I want to hear from others and their lived experiences. Yeah. And one of the things I've championed was transparency throughout this entire year and will continue to do that. That's why now this conversation is in the public arena.
That's right.
And now people can talk about it and people can share their ideas. Maybe that's not the best idea to move the police department to the library. Maybe they should go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But at least the conversation is started.
Well, and that's why I wanted to do this is because I was having a hard time 2 years in now. I was having a hard time communicating fully all that I wanted people to understand about the discussions taking place between you and I on these topics. And we have social media and I can try to put a post together and, you know, I can do my monthly newsletter and I can say a few things from the bench. I wanted a forum and a space where we can really have conversations, not interview people. I wanted to talk about these issues and talk about the path and the direction I wanted to go. So I'm just grateful that people are willing to come in and have these discussions. Is there political risk to having discussions like this? Well, sure. One of the things I've learned is that I like to think out loud. I like to talk out loud and process my ideas, out loud. That's not always a trait that is that benefits a politician well. But I'm not concerned about those things. I'm not concerned about a political cost or a risk. I want to contend for righteousness. I want to contend for doing the right thing. I want to contend for people. I want to contend for this community. And I want to contend for the pivots and the reforms and the things that I think will produce a better output. That's what moves me. That's why I'm in this job. That's why I want to continue in this job. And I think it's the same for you.
You know, having parents who, again, live in this community and making decisions that I am reminded every day that a lot of our Wichitans are making hard decisions about trade-offs because literally, do I pay for my rent? Do I pay for my prescription? These are hard conversations. And so if we can do our part as local government to make sure that we reduce the burden for working class families, that is what we need to focus on. Yeah. And so Wichita needs to be, and it will be, the best place to live, work, and raise a family. Because I'm grateful that not just being an American, but I'm grateful that I got to live in this community and I see the good in this community. And if we work together towards those priorities and then work across the aisle or across the street with county on these shared services, I think that Wichita really will put itself on its map.
That's right.
And people will say, that's the place I would like to raise my own family.
It's okay to be a visionary leader and to present ideas, and the community can tell us whether they like the idea or not, but they deserve the idea. They deserve the conversation. We got a couple more minutes. We went long, and but it's okay in my view, because I want to have this discussion with you, and I want people to hear the way we talk about these things. I promised this discussion about a manager-led versus an elected-led style of government. This topic of conversation came up on Facebook in a different thread. I think most people don't understand really that, the city of Wichita government is a government style where it's a manager-led style of government. He's the CEO of the organization, and then you have your electeds, much like a board of directors, the way you described it. The city manager's been there for, I think, 15 or 16 years.
So I'm really grateful that City Manager Layton has served for 16 years. He just celebrated that in February. I actually came from a WSU class about law just today, and one of the questions they asked was, well, you guys are electeds, and the city manager is not an elected individual, so how is he held accountable? And so if you look at our form of government, that is the role of the city council, to hold the city manager accountable. Yeah. Because all the departments lead up to him, and it stops at his level. So
let me ask something here. And again, what I'm asking is by no means an indictment on Bob Layton, because Bob and I actually have really enjoyed getting to know him. I don't, he works at the city. I'm a county guy, but I've appreciated his perspective. So I don't want this perceived as this is an indictment on his tenure or what he does. By no stretch am I going that direction. What I'm asking is, 16 years is there will come a time when there will be a new city manager. Probably sooner than later. We're probably looking at years, not decades, of that decision. Is that an opportune time to talk about the style of government, the form of government for the city of Wichita? Does it does it need to be a manager-led versus an elected-led form of government? And when does that discussion need to happen? I'll tell you, and this is just from the county, the electeds are involved in nearly every decision. 46 departments, we meet with department heads, the budget process, we are very involved. It is very much, and Tom Stoltz is a wonderful county manager. He is a fantastic county manager. But we're involved in every decision.
That's very different than the city.
It's very different.
Presented a budget by the city manager after he has had private conversations with each of the department heads.
With his department heads.
Whereas you guys are in that process with the department heads.
That's correct.
So it's a very different form of government. So to answer your question about should it be a city council manager form of government, really the community should answer that question. And back to the conversation, we need to have more conversations about the role of local government.
That's good, Lily.
This is the way it is right now. It might not be the right way. Maybe we've evolved. Well, we need to have that conversation, and someone should lead that effort on, is this the right government system? But again, as in this form of government, the mayor of the city of Wichita has no veto power, no executive powers.
Yeah.
I'm only one vote out of 7, and it takes a majority of 4 people to pass anything. And so in this type of government, my role is to be the ambassador. And I think a lot of folks just didn't understand that I was not the city manager.
Yeah.
And they often asked, well, why are you not making the decisions at the department level? Well, it's a
different.
mayor system.
It's not in your purview, your job description to do those things. I'm just going to say this. When we look at other cities, the Tulsas of the world, the Oklahoma cities of the world, they have a different form of government, a strong mayor. I think that I think when transition does happen in the future, I think it's an opportune time to bring that conversation to the community. I do think that what we are asking for from this city, from this community, that the electeds need to drive that policy. The electeds need to be the one that's setting that vision and planting that vision and driving that vision. Again, not an indictment on the current form of government, but the city of Wichita's changed. And the city of Wichita is going to continue to evolve and continue to grow and continue to be something to this community, into this region, into this state that is very needed. And I think the people's representatives need to be in the driver's seat of that. So I would encourage you, Mayor, that in the future that conversation should be a topic of conversation, that maybe the style of government, the form of government needs to be looked at the city of Wichita. So, well, listen, this has been enlightening. It's been encouraging. I deeply appreciate you, and I appreciate our relationship. You have been a breath of fresh air to me in many regards. I've watched the way you've handled criticism. I've watched the way you've handled success. I've watched the way you've tried to find your political footing with no political background whatsoever. And I just want you to know that I appreciate it. And here's what I appreciate. I appreciate that you always take a call. I appreciate that you're always present. I appreciate that you come to our offices at the county to sit down and visit, and you invite us to the table. And that certainly you and I share a vision of where we want to go with reform. But that's not just talk, and that's not just political talking points. Like, you're really doing it. Like, you're really saying, hey, let's figure this out. We don't know what the plan is, but let's get to the table. Let's draw this thing up and see what the community says. So
we've had a lot of, I think, conversations that are getting the work started. And I'm very appreciative of you, because it does not make a social media post, and it does not make for the conversation piece, but the real work that's being done is happening.
Yeah.
And it is actually inviting people to the table that need to be at the table, and those who are missing from the table, I'm making sure that they're also accepted at the table.
Yeah.
And there's always a seat for you. And that's part of empowering individuals, empowering people to know that they have that opportunity to speak up. If they want to be those change makers in a positive way, we welcome you. We want to make Wichita the best place. And so I'm very grateful to you, because you also answered the phone call or answered the text. And I appreciate you for always just being that big brother, basically, that is helping me understand that in this arena of politics, you don't have to agree on every single issue, but we can have a discussion,
That's it.
a respectful discussion, and then we can defend our ideas or also modify our ideas.
That's right.
And being accepting of that openness and that continuous learning, I think is the reason why you and I connect so well.
That's it.
And so I want our community to be those critical thinkers, those thoughtful individuals that want to be part of the solution.
Well, let's
too.
keep pushing it. Let's keep going. Let's keep working. Let's keep serving. Let's keep loving. And let's keep moving this community forward. You in?
Yes,
I'm in.
absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you.